We'll be talking to Marq Evans, the documentary filmmaker who came up with a film called ClayDream, a story about Will Vinton and his studio and everything. And so that's what you're going to be watching today on Animated Educated.
Thank you for turning me on. I am a replica of the Model 505 Type P electro brain equipped with quasi-hysterical input, which is proved infallible in advancing reasoning quotients far and above that of my inferior humanoid creators. Now that you have activated my energy cells, I will proceed to carry out the infinite mutations for which I was programmed. I am a replica, short circuit, short program does not know short compute, correct, error, key, mutations, metamorphological mutations, reversal, comparative mutations, metamorphology, potential program, quotient, as the world turns, 6 o'clock news, that's the way it is, mutations, metamorphological mutations, resistors, breather resistors, metamorphological mutations, Blabbermouth computer.
Thank you for coming to Animated Educated and just talking about Will Vinton and your movie that you made called ClayDream. How long did it take to make this film?
It was about 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. It must have been like 2015 that I kind of first had this idea and approached Will. I didn't know him. I knew, of him and knew his work and everything, but reached out and he wrote back and said he would meet with me, but he wasn't really interested in doing a film or anything. And it kind of remained that way for a couple months. And we just stayed in touch. And finally it just got to the point where he thought, yeah, all right, I'll do this. So I think he had to kind of vet me out a little bit for a while.
What do you see as the legacy of Will Vinton?
Obviously, first there's the work. There's the work that is attached to his name, and the studio, that he created. So there's all the characters, there's the work. But I think beyond that, it's probably kind of like the branches from a tree and all the people that worked at the studio, and people that have gone on to do their own things. And I think a lot of that came out. It was when Will passed away. Reading all the online comments of people that maybe had never really kind of put that into perspective for themselves as far as like what he did, what he created, that wasn't there, before in Portland. And then, now you look at the Portland animation scene and it's huge and it's great. But so many of these people, when they really looked back to where it all started, all roads led to Will. So I think there's the characters, but certainly, the people that came through that studio and have gone off to do incredible things are probably, I think of as his legacy.
Yeah, I remember when I first saw Closed Mondays. I mean, that was like in 1974, and then he made another film with called Mountain Music like a year later. But Closed Monday that won an Oscar, and he did it with Bob Gardiner, who is also a kind of like an animator and kind of a creative guy. But do you explore kind of their relationship in the film?
Yeah, big time. And we ended up being fortunate enough to interview Bob's daughter, Nicole. And she also was a great resource with, pictures and additional film and everything. And it was great. I mean, their story, their friendship, and then, turned to, being a really tough relationship for both of them. But yeah, that's definitely explored. And Bob, certainly, I hope his family feels like he gets his due in the film too, because I know he never felt that he got it. And to a person, everybody we interviewed that knew them, they needed each other for that film to be as great as it was. Bob needed somebody like Will to really focus him and produce the film. And then Bob's creative genius, where, talking to people like Bill Plimpton, they're saying Bob Gardiner was a creative genius, no doubt about it. And that was great for Will to have that. And Will always worked with great people. So yeah, it's that's a story that is definitely explored in the film.
I just remember hearing and how Bob would sometimes walk around with his Oscar mounted to a sword, and walk around. And
I mean, and it got pretty nasty. I mean, there was Bob had threatened to kill Will when he was the grand marshal of the parade, and then yeah, those two films. Bob is credited as additional animation and mountain music, but I think he just did a little bit of animation. And when they went their separate ways, their plan was that they would still help each other out on projects. And Bob did a couple things, but he just never really kind of could keep it going when he was, his own studio. He kind of really, whether it was Will or somebody else that was more of a producer, he kind of needed that other person to keep him focused. And I don't think he ever really, unfortunately found that person.
And then the California Raisins came along, and that was suddenly everything was, claymation was the thing.
Yeah.
Did you get to see any other footage of making of films about that era or anything that you could?
Yeah, I mean, this was such a pleasure to make because we had Will had his own collection, but then there's a handful of people out there that are collectors as well. And we were able to get just, it was just really a treasure trove of materials to be able to piece this together from all the old work and then behind the scenes of the people making the work, and then behind the scenes, footage that had never been seen before. So it's really quite amazing. And then the Raisins came right after Twain didn't really have any commercial success. They put all that work into the Twain film, having done all the short films that were really highly regarded, an Oscar winner, and then I think 4 other films after that, short films, were Oscar nominated. And then the Twain film was kind of like Will called it the zenith of claymation, because everything that they'd done was thrown into that film, but it got marketed towards kids. And it wasn't really a kid's film, and it didn't do well. And that was kind of, the end of it at the time. If you have one failure, you might not get another chance, especially with something like claymation. And then, luckily enough, the California Raisins thing came, and nobody thought that was going to be a big deal. I mean, I think the original ad buy was like $5,000 or something crazy small. And it totally took off in a way that nobody ever would have expected. And that ended up being, the studio kind of became known for the California Raisins, which wasn't something that they were really ready for or even thought was accurate, because they'd done all these other, very artistic films beforehand. And then it also took them down a path where, because they didn't get any of the licensing for the Raisins, which I think at one point were worth like $400 million in merchandise. And so then that was kind of the eye-opening thing, that they needed to create their own characters that the studio owned. And that's where Wilshire Pig comes in, and they thought Wilshire Pig would be the next Mickey Mouse and things like that. So there's an interesting story, not just because of the success of the Raisins had, but where it kind of took the studio, both good and bad.
I've got some California Raisins right here.
Are those the old Hardee's Carl's Jr. figures, maybe?
I don't know. It just says, California Raisin, made in China, Here they are. But yeah, I've got these, and then I also have an actual raisin. While I was at the studio, I got they were throwing away all these armatures. This is the underskeleton of what a raisin looked like. I guess this is what they look like when they dry out. But basically, it's a big glob of clay here that was kind of similar to this guy. And this is all kind of lead encased in plastic, shrink wrap there, and it can move. And these little tennis shoes are, carved, and you can actually take the legs off and change the shoes, things like that. But yeah, this was an armature that was underneath the actual raisin itself. It didn't really have any, ball and socket joints or anything like that. But it was pretty secure. You can, leave it up like that. And anyway, they were throwing a bunch of these away at the studio, and I just had to grab one because I didn't know it was. And I kind of liked it just like this, because it was kind of showing the skeleton of it,
It was really amazing going through all of Will's, both before he passed, and then even after. I went over there a couple times to continue looking through boxes, and there was just so much. And at one point found it was amazing, going through these boxes and seeing original the 4 Raisins and the Noid, and he had still all those characters intact. They were in boxes though. They were still in really good shape. And actually we did I think it's like a 10-15 second kind of opening title with clay animation that displays the ClayDream title. And in that, Tony Merrithew
Yes.
who was a an animator and for Vinton.
Right.
He has a lot of old figures, and I think he's actually even collectors that are out there will send them to him and he'll fix them up and everything and send them back. But he has a bunch of Raisin and Noid parts. And so I think we have Raisin's hair and hands and Noid eyes are all part of this opening sequence. So it's pretty cool to be able to use some original materials for our new Claymation title.
Right. You mentioned the Noid. I mean, that was kind of like after the Raisins that they started to get more into advertising, and yeah, that's when the Noid came out. And
now he's back on TV. It's not the same,
Yeah.
It's still fun seeing him. It's he's not nearly as cool not being Clay, but it's pretty fun to see him back.
Who animated that opening sequence that you have in the film?
Her name's Ashley Archiga, and she works a lot with Starburns Industries, who's a production company that we worked with out of LA. They did Anomalisa was an Academy nominated film that they did a couple years ago in stop motion. They're probably best known for being the original creators of the Rick and Morty show.
Right.
And there are several former Vinton studio people that are part of Starburns as well. But yeah, Ashley did that, and just totally, it was awesome. We love it.
Oh, cool.
And then to kind of pair with that, we were able to get, so Heard It Through the Grapevine is used a couple times in the film, as you can imagine. Including we had a cover done by Isaac Brock, who's from the band Modest Mouse, Seattle or Portland-based band. They did a cover of the song for us, which it's pretty great.
One thing I remember is with his interaction with Michael Jackson. That was a very interesting kind of relationship. I don't know if you have that in the film at all, or
yeah, it's touched on. There was, again, just like everything, there was earlier cuts where that was much longer of a sequence and it's tightened up, but that to me, that kind of represents Will at his peak, where he had Michael Jackson at his peak reaching out to him, trying to do something. And so there's two things that we have of material that are pretty cool. One, there's these voicemails that Michael kept leaving for Will. He left like 5 in a row because he couldn't get a hold of Will. So he's calling his home phone number and he's just leaving voicemail after voicemail. So we've got those in the film. And then he also made Will a video trying to, show what the Michael Raisin and the other characters around him should look like and their attitude and everything. So we do go into that. And like I said, I think it is like from a story beat, it kind of represents like Will at his peak, like all of his dreams are coming true. He's got all these opportunities, and that's kind of, before it starts unraveling. But yeah, that's in there.
Yeah. I think,
and actually the story is this didn't make the film, but he did it for free. Michael did. Because apparently he had just got done with doing a Pepsi commercial where infamously his hair caught on fire, and it was this whole big ordeal, and he didn't really want to do that kind of thing anymore, but he loved the California Raisins. And so the deal that he made with Will was, I'll do this for free to be a California Raisin, but on set, it's just the client doesn't get to be part of it. He didn't want to deal with the client. He didn't want to deal with the ad agency. He dealt with like Will and a couple other people, and that was it. And that was his deal, that he would do it and he would do it for free, but it had to be his way.
Right. When I was there, we were working on the PJs and Gary and Mike. I don't know if that was like 2 Fox kind of TV shows that came out about.
We talk about those, and again, they represent. So I think the Michael Jackson story kind of represents Will at his personal peak, where he's got people like Michael reaching out to him, but the PJs and Gary and Mike represented the peak of the studio revenue wise. That's the largest that the studio was, 400 plus employees, and the revenue that they were generating. And that does kind of represent when they lost those 2 TV shows, and then other things that the studio was developing didn't come to fruition, and Will owed money to Phil Knight and all those things happening. That's when it really started getting out of control. And I know Will had fun working like with Eddie Murphy on the PJ's pilot and everything, but even for him personally at that time, I think he felt things were getting out of control and he wasn't loving what he was doing. He wasn't creating anything. He was just like this kind of figurehead and not super happy himself at that time.
Yeah. Are there any things you learned that you were like, wow, I don't know if I can put this in the film, or
because I remember feeling like that I hit it off pretty well with Will, and then when I followed up, he was just like, yeah, I still don't really want to do it. And I was like, oh man. And it was like that for, a few months, but until he finally just, I look back and I wonder like, because I didn't know Will was sick at that time. Will was sick for 12 years before he passed.
Wow.
And so he would have been, well into it then. And I didn't know that. I didn't know probably for 2 years into the project before he finally said something. And so looking back, I realized, he must have had that realization that he wanted to do something like that and preserve the legacy of the work. I don't think it was really about him. It was the work and the people and all that. And I think he just wanted to like have something in one place that would solidify all of that. So, but yeah. And then the gaining trust part too, that's interesting is, it was 2 years in, I think, before he mentioned that he had not the being sick part, that was also a couple of years, but that he had footage that was crucial footage for this film of the whole lawsuit with Phil Knight. And I don't think he was ready to share that until a couple of years in. And then he thought, all right, I think I'm in good hands. And I remember when he said, do you have the deposition stuff? And I was like, what is there, like transcripts from this? And he said, no, we shot it. And then actually I found out later that, he had thought maybe he would, I found a note where he was going to reach out to Michael Moore about doing a documentary.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And this footage is just incredible. And it's in the film. So I think the film's really going to surprise people because of just all the material. I mean, it's an amazing story. It's an amazing ride that Will, his work starting this company in his basement and then taking it to being this, $40 million a year company. And he's in the room with Phil Knight. And I think there's a lot that people don't know and that they're going to be surprised about. And, but it definitely was a joy making it with Will and then hopefully honoring him.
So it's going to Tribeca like in a month. It'll be premiering again.
Sunday, June 13th at 4 p.m. Pacific will be the world premiere, which anybody in the United States can go buy a ticket and watch it, but it's not where they could watch it any time. It's 4:00.
Oh, okay.
So that'll be like the online premiere, and then we'll play other festivals, and there'll be, I'm sure plenty of festivals in person. We want to do a big Portland screening, but this is just kind of the start of the future distribution process. So at some point, hopefully, we'll make a sale to, a perfect world will be to a major streamer, and people can watch it, that way. But that'll be down the road a little bit.
Yeah. So how did you feel after you said you've been working on this for 5 years? Now it's finally done. How do you feel about that when it's finally done?
Actually, one thing that's been really cool is seeing there's this whole up-res process. I mean, all the interviews we shot are in 4K, and even some of the films some of Will's, old short films, we were able to get remastered in 4K, but the entire project we're up-resing to 4K. And it's been really cool seeing a lot of, like 480p footage that we've been editing with for years now looking pretty amazing.
At the Tribeca Film Festival, when is that? I mean,
so that will be online. So anybody in the United States can watch it Sunday, June 13th. So that'll be the world premiere. So 4:00 our time, 7:00 Eastern, 4:00 Pacific. Sunday, June 13th, it'll premiere online. I can send you a link. There's a link right now to like buy tickets. It's $15 per ticket. Okay. And that'll be the first time anybody that will see the film. And we'd like to do a big event in Portland, probably this summer sometime, where more of the, Will's family and friends and people that are in the film and all that could come and see it, whether it's at a drive-in or hopefully by then we can actually, do it in a theater.
Yeah.
And have kind of the Portland premiere that way, because I think that'll be really fun for the town.
All right. Well, that's great. I can't wait to see, what you finally come up with. Sounds like you had a lot of help.
Tune in June 13th.
June 13th. Okay. And I want to thank you again for coming on Anime Educate and, talking to, telling us more about Will and your documentary about Will Vinton. And, I urge everybody to go see it. All right.
Sounds good. Well, it's nice to meet you, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, maybe we'll see you next time.
All right.
in person. All right, take care.
Have a good one.
See you later.
Thanks.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Marq Evans and got to learn a little bit more about who Will Vinton was and what he's famous for, things like that. You can also go to see his the new documentary called ClayDream, the story about Will Vinton and his studio and his life and things like that. It's at the Tribeca Film Festival, June 13th at 4 p.m. Yeah, I'm really anxious to see what this documentary is about, and hopefully other people will learn about him and see what he's done. And because he's kind of like the father of clay animation, or claymation, as he came up with the term. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, just go ahead and push that button right there. Just go ahead and subscribe to this channel. Remember, the 500th subscriber will win a prize, as well as the 1,000th subscriber. We also have this video up here. It's pretty good. And that one's not bad either. So yeah, tune in, and we'll see you next time on Animated Educated.